La Plaza Mayor Spanish Language Tutorials. I'm Mr. Jason Cummings. Vamos a hablar de la formación del pretérito en español. El pretérito tiene 4 grupos de terminaciones. The preterit has 4 groups of endings. El primero son los verbos regulares que terminan en AR, regular verbs that end in AR. El segundo son los verbos regulares que terminan en ERIR, regular verbs that end in ER or IR. Tercero, tenemos el pretérito fuerte, verbos con raíces irregulares. Thirdly, we have what some people call the strong preterite, el pretérito fuerte, which are verbs that have irregular roots. Y finalmente tenemos los super irregulares. Lastly, we have the super irregulars, which isn't really a set of endings in itself. It's simply the final 4 verbs in the Spanish language that don't fit into any of these prior 3 categories. Vamos a hablar de cada una de estas 4 categorías en este video. Primero tenemos que hablar de verbos regulares que terminan en AR. As you can see here with the conjugations of cantar, to sing, there's a series of endings that goes with all regular AR verbs. The yo form of cantar is yo canté, an E with an accent mark over it. Tú cantaste, ASTE at the end. Él, ella, usted cantó, an O with an accent mark over it. Nosotros cantamos, AMOS, cantamos. Vosotros cantasteis, ASTEIS, cantasteis. And ellos cantaron, ARON. Now these endings are consistent for all regular AR verbs. Tomar sería tomé, tú tomaste, ella tomó, nosotras tomamos, vosotras tomasteis, and ellas tomaron. Y buscar finalmente va a ser yo busqué, tú buscaste, ella buscó, nosotros buscamos, vosotros buscasteis, and ellas buscaron. Pretérito, los verbos que terminan en car, gar o zar tienen una pequeña irregularidad. In the first person singular of the preterite, or the yo form, the verbs that end in car, gar, or sar, car, gar, or zar, have a small irregularity. Now, all of the other verb forms, the tú, the él, ella, usted form, the nosotros, vosotros, and ellos, ellas, ustedes forms, are going to have the exact same conjugations as if these were totally regular verbs. So, buscaste, buscó, buscamos, buscastes, buscaron, from buscar, to look for. Nevertheless, in the yo form, we have to say busqué, which sounds just like it would if it were a totally regular verb, and that's the whole point of the thing. In order to keep that C, a hard C sound that would sound like an English K, we have to write QU. Because a CE, if we were to conjugate it totally normally, BUSCE, which we wouldn't do, would be pronounced busté or busé. And in order to maintain the hard C in buscar, we have to write a QU. So busqué, BUSQUE, accent mark over the E. Pagar is very much the same situation. A verb that ends in GIR is going to be the same deal. We have to write pagué, PAGUE. Normally, we would just write PAGE, thinking it a regular AR verb, but that would be pronounced pagé. And in order to maintain the hard G sound in pagar, we have to insert the U simply in the yo form. Empezar, likewise, the Z changes into a C, and that's the only difference for the verbs ending in ZAR. Nevertheless, even though the car, gar, zar verbs have this small irregularity in the yo form, they still follow all of the conjugations for regular AR verbs. En segundo lugar, tenemos que hablar de los verbos regulares que terminan en ER o IR. In second place, we have to talk about the regular verbs that end in ER or IR. Comer, an ER verb to eat, subir, an IR verb to go up or to put something up, dormir, an IR verb to sleep. We'll see that they all have the same endings, because these are regular ER-IR verbs. Comer is yo comí, with an accent mark over that I. Tú comiste, I-S-T-E. Él comió, with an accent mark over the O, C-O-M-I-O, accent mark over the O again. Nosotros comimos, I-M-O-S. Vosotros comisteis, I-S-T-E-I-S. And ellas comieron, I-E-R-O-N. Now, I've separated this out into two groups because we can see that the ER-IR endings are, while similar, quite a lot different from the AR endings that we saw before. The same holds true for subir and dormir. Yo subí, tú subiste, él subió, nosotros subimos, vosotros subisteis, ellas subieron. And likewise dormir, yo dormí, tú dormiste, él durmió, nosotros dormimos, vosotras dormisteis, and ellos durmieron. Tenemos que hablar de los cambios ortográficos, spelling changes, con los verbos regulares ER y R en el pretérito. You may remember that when you learned the present tense, you talked about boot verbs, stem changes or spelling changes that occurred in all of the verb forms except for the nosotros and vosotros forms. And when you drew that out on a typical conjugation chart, it looked as if you had a boot form. It's a bit different in the preterite. Es un poco diferente en el pretérito. Hay dos tipos de cambios. There are changes that go from an E to an I, as in pedir and preferir, and changes that go from an O to a U, as in dormir. Now, we don't have a boot verb situation in the preterite. What we have is a situation in which only the él, ella, usted, third person singular, and ellos, ellas, ustedes, third person plural, forms are going to change. So, the yo form and the tú form, yo pedí, tú pediste, are exactly as they are in regular ER-IR conjugations. And likewise for the nosotros and vosotros forms, pedimos, pedisteis, totally normal, nothing out of the ordinary. But in the third person singular, the E in pedir changes to an I, and we have pidió. And in the third person plural, it's the same, pidieron. The same thing happens with preferir. The second E in preferir in the el form becomes prefirió, prefirió. And in the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, prefirieron. Very good. And finally, as you saw before in the last slide, with dormir, that O, again, it's the same as it ever was in yo dormí, tú dormiste. But ella durmió with a U, and ellos durmieron with a U. Again, I want to reiterate, this is just in the third person singular and in the third person plural. And also, even though these verbs have this small spelling change in the two third person forms, they still take all of the regular ER-IR verb endings in the preterite.